Hey everyone, I just want to share some further comments about Venus retrograde. I did a live yesterday, which, certain points were covered. You may have heard that, you may have not, but it's harder when I'm doing a live to just to keep it at a concise, focused sort of level. So I thought I'll come back and just summarize the various themes that I've actually spoken about, probably in the last month, really, throughout various videos, including the one with women. So let's just start, first of all, here. I noticed, this was yesterday. Um, Lilith is in Libra and Venus is in Aries. And I find the combination of that energy really very, very interesting. Before we talk about Venus retrograde, I just want to make a couple of comments about this. Um, Libra is obviously about relationships, and Lilith, if you'll recall or are not aware of, was the first wife of Adam. It's quite a long and complex story, but fundamentally, she left Adam because she didn't feel that she was his equal. Here she is in Libra, which is about equality. So I think matters in relationships at the moment where things feel really imbalanced and not equal will be put under the spotlight again. So Lilith is a archetype that really corresponds to autonomy, freedom, freedom of expression, authenticity, the rawness of our wild, natural nature, right? Just being who we are and not needing to conform to any system or anybody else's ideals and values in order to be accepted and fit in. That's, in a nutshell, that's what Lilith speaks to. So given that she's in Libra at the moment, I I suspect that it's probably going to highlight these sorts of issues in certain relationships for people. So, things like give and take, things like equality, things like balance, things like being seen by your partner, being heard, or in other relationships, because Libra speaks to a diverse of relationships. It's not just our personal intimate partner. It could be any one-on-one relationship that we have with another, where it feels to you, for example, that there's an imbalance here. Um, a very simple example, which may sound petty, but it is real for a lot of people. It might be that you're interacting with somebody on social media and you are constantly commenting on their posts and constantly acknowledging them and all that sort of stuff, right? And you feel that they're not giving back the same thing to you. So that brings up that issue of, hang on, there's an imbalance here. I'm constantly paying attention and acknowledging you, but you're not doing the same for me. It's, as I said, it sounds like a petty issue, but this can blow out of proportion for different reasons, right? Depending on the people and depending on what's going on in their lives and so forth. I'm just using that as a way of example, right? To draw a distinction between the fact that Libra, first of all, corresponds to relationships, but it corresponds to any one-on-one relationship we have, even with a person we may not have met physically, right? So this is happening right now. And, Lilith has been in and out of Libra for a while, but I think what's making it more interesting at the moment is that Venus is now in Aries. And I think the polarity, of Aries Libra is in the spotlight now, right? Because of these two archetypes. They're both archetypes that correspond to the feminine in different ways. And Venus in Aries too is very much about autonomy, independence, courage, directness, honesty, doing their own thing, actually. Venus in Aries, there's a lot of different ways to look at it. And, if you're to look at it from the point of view of essential dignities and abilities, Venus in Aries is said to be in detriment, right? It's not the best place for Venus, but on the other hand, it can serve in very powerful ways the more awareness a person has. Um, because basically, a Venus in Aries individual is learning so much in their life about themselves. It's Aries is the self, and although Venus generally is an archetype that corresponds to relationships and connecting with others and give and take and receiving and drawing in and attracting. Venus is the magnetic principle of attraction. So you can see that they're just very different energies, Aries and Venus. But Venus will travel through Aries every year, right? So there's a reason why that happens. It's not that it's not supposed to happen or that, it has no meaning. It has tremendous meaning, right? So Venus in Aries, is in detriment, but there's a few layers here. We've got that side of it. We've got Venus retrograde in Aries. We've got Venus coming to a conjunction with the Sun later in the month, which will be the Aries Venus star point. We've got Venus's heliacal cycle, which I've spoken about very thoroughly with Rumen. You can catch that video if you're interested in understanding what it means for Venus's heliacal cycle, which again simply means when does she appear and disappear at various times. What happens is she does that in 5 signs in the zodiac over an 8-year period, and there's tremendous significance associated and connected to that based on ancient teachings. Again, if you want to understand that more, just check out the video with myself and Rumen that was uploaded recently. Going back to the present moment, as I said, I think this Lilith in Libra will bring up these issues for certain individuals. And I think particularly for people who are perhaps more in touch with the Lilith aspect within themselves, Lilith is quite a non-consensus archetype. And if you go back to her story, she left the consensus model, as it were, that was proposed to her, and she just went off into the wild to live free and independent and the way that she wanted to. There's a lot of details to her story that get a really sort of dark projection from the patriarchal sort of system of things, right? She's looked upon as like this demonic female who, did some terrible things and so on and so forth. But you need to understand the whole story from the beginning, and there's a lot of nuances. There's just a lot of things about that story. It's not black and white. But from perhaps an archetypal psychological level, when we're looking at Lilith and how that energy sort of speaks to us individually, I think for those that are more non-consensus type, they perhaps might resonate with the energy of Lilith a lot more, especially if you're in a relationship that just doesn't feel equal and doesn't feel balanced for whatever reason or reasons that may be. And because Venus is in Aries and she too speaks to autonomy and freedom and self-expression and independence and all of that, we've got this polarity, Aries, Libra, at the spotlight right now with Venus in Aries and Lilith in Libra. So I expect, this polarity of Aries, Libra, which is ourself and others, all the relationships that we have, all the interactions we have, and how we feel in those processes, in those relationships, what's coming up, what's showing up at this point in time. What are the imbalances that are showing up? Where am I able to be myself, or am I not able to be myself? I wrote something on Facebook yesterday about these two, and it was just a small little sentence. I just said Lilith currently in Libra with Venus retrograde in Aries feels like such a strong mirror in all of our relationships. Lilith can help us take off the fake mask and express our true self, even if it means being alone. Venus in Aries also seeks autonomy and independence, freedom. Perhaps the combination of the two can help us step up towards courage with our raw self to remove the masks. And so I'll leave that there relative to Lilith in Libra and move on to Venus retrograde, which began on the 3rd of March, completes around the 13th or 14th of April. So it's a journey of 40 days and 40 nights. Obviously, one of the first things to identify is the Aries house of your birth chart. Which house is it? Are there any planets in there? Or are there any other planets aspecting this Venus star point or this Venus retrograde cycle, which includes both Pisces and Aries, because Venus is going to go back into Pisces again, the late degree of Pisces. And Neptune is there at the last degree of Pisces as well, and actually forming a conjunction. Let me just go to there's a conjunction with Sun and Venus, and there's Neptune. So it's an out of sign conjunction, but it's still relatively close. So there must be something about the energy of Neptune that is connecting to this Venus star point. A conjunction is the strongest aspect out of all of them. So it's a bit of a, I'm not sure which energy is going to speak louder, the sextile from Pluto or the conjunction from Neptune. I think both will be important in different ways, obviously, because they both represent very different things. But anyway, before I go to the aspects, let's just go back to Venus at the moment, a retrograde in Aries. So one of the things about planets going retrograde, again a few different ways to look at this. My favorite way of looking at the journey of planets retrograde, either natally or just as a transit, is through Jeffrey Wolf Green's teachings. I love his insight and his wisdom from the perspective of the soul, and what is the soul ultimately trying to achieve, with its birth chart, with the placement of everything. Because it really all comes back to the soul. We are all working with the same planets. It's not like each of us are working with a different set of planets or stars or archetypes. So 8.5 billion people on the planet all work with the same energies. But what makes it unique in terms of our experience is the soul and where the soul is at any given moment in any given incarnation, right? That's the unique sort of blueprint of everything. For instance, 2 billion people on the planet might be born with Venus retrograde or Venus in Aries. Are they all going to have the same experience? Of course not. Which is why I often say in a lot of my transmissions and readings, well, not readings, or readings publicly, that we can make some general comments and bring up some general themes about what's happening in the sky, but to really determine more purely and more specifically how this will impact you, we've always got to bring it back to where the soul is at in their journey at the moment. Each soul is completely unique. Just like each person is completely unique, each woman is completely unique, each man is completely unique. There's no two that are the same, which is quite an extraordinary thing to think about, just in terms of consciousness and creation. We're all so unique. Our fingerprints, no one's fingerprints are the same. How extraordinary is that? We don't think about those things often, but it's just I think, something that can help us remember just how unique we all are. Whether we're in consensus state, whether we're in a more evolved state, whatever it is, we are all still incredibly unique. So when planets are retrograde, in terms of the way Jeffrey Wolf Green explains it, he relates the retrograde archetype to being closely associated to the planet Uranus, meaning that when a planet is retrograde, and it just even logically makes sense, when a planet is retrograde, the energy turns within, right? It pulls us back into ourself. And when we get pulled back into ourself, we're in a place where we'll make our own decisions, our own choices. We'll reflect on things from our own perspective, our own personal perspective. And to go deeper, we will get more in touch with the soul aspect of ourself, because that's what we're looking to do when planets are retrograde. We're trying to go deeper into ourself to understand ourself better without the influence or need of reassurance or validation from the external world and or from others. So when a planet is retrograde or natally, or goes retrograde via transit, or goes retrograde via progression, this same principle applies to those three separate positions: being born with planets retrograde, planets going retrograde via transit, or planets going retrograde by secondary progression, which happens to all of us with different planets at different times. The same meaning applies to all, and that is, it is a journey, a personal journey of self-discovery in some kind of way that leads us back to what our soul is really desiring to understand about itself. So even Venus retrograde is very much about that. It we get taken in back into ourself, which is why it tends to be more of a journey where we might withdraw more. Now, what's Venus connects to, social activity, for example, right? Relationships, social activity, enjoyment, all those things, and much more. So when she's retrograde, there can be, a decrease of that type of activity. There's some sort of pull that pulls us back into ourselves to reassess, reevaluate, and reflect on our relationships, on our self-worth, on our self-value, on our self-love, and how that experience has been unfolding in our life, where we are with that at the moment in our life relative to our relationships, and how we can, especially in Aries, how we can develop a deeper integration in ourself about our own worth, about our own value, about who we are, and what do we need to fulfill that within ourselves versus trying to reach into everybody else to give it to us. So I personally love planets being retrograde, whether it's in a natal chart or whether it's a transit of a planet retrograde. Perhaps that's because I've got so many planets retrograde in my chart. So I resonate with that archetype so strongly, that the retrograde archetype, which would describe an individual who is more of a loner, who doesn't need to be accepted by, the world at large or specific communities to feel validated or worthy within themselves relative to their life journey, what they're experiencing and what they're choosing. It's quite a strong, position to be in. It might be lonely at times because it's just not part of the consensus world. And it's not about um, being fake and pleasing an audience or people or society or the world so that you can be accepted. It's the opposite to that, which is why Lilith in Libra is quite prominent, at the moment, because she puts the spotlight on these sorts of things too. Now, Venus in Aries, in a dysfunctional way, can be very narcissistic and, very self-absorbed and, needing others to sort of make her feel like she's the only one, she's the most special one, and so on and so forth. That can create a real imbalance in relationships. So it depends on whether you have Venus in Aries natally or not. But overall, this retrograde journey is an opportunity for all of us, no matter who we are, no matter where we are, to go through some process of inner reflection, to disassociate a bit more from a lot of the outside noise, and to find, that sense of feeling worthy within yourself, regardless of whether you are receiving it externally from others. It's about finding that um, that worth within yourself ultimately. Now, Aries, of course, is ruled by Mars, so it can flare things up as well. It can bring up some anger and some conflict and things like that. Of course, there's that side of things too. But I always say, with the fiery sort of aggressive archetypes, um, certain individuals, may not have a strong Mars or strong Aries in their chart, let's say, or very little fire emphasis in their chart. Um, swamped or dominated by earth and water, maybe elements. And so those individuals, when it comes to planets passing through the fire element, can really benefit a lot because they might feel um, they might feel that they just don't have the strength and the courage, to stand up for themselves or to push through certain things because it's not their natural disposition. So that in this case, Venus in Aries might help people in those situations that need to be courageous, and make bold decisions. Aries is about making bold decisions, even if it's going to upset other people or piss other people off. Um, as long as we can do that with some balance, Libra, and some awareness, and we're not just, sort of dumping or projecting completely, that is having no self-awareness, then, making bold decisions that are more conducive to what makes you feel um, alive, what makes you feel worthy, what makes you feel autonomous and free and independent to be yourself. I think that's an important thing. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. As long as we can do it with some awareness about others in terms of not projecting and, not sort of creating uh, toxic conflict. That's where Libra comes in to help us balance out some of that fiery Aries energy. That's why every sign has a polarity. Every polarity is each other's shadow, and they both work in tandem. One might be more at one end of the spectrum, and one might be more at the other end of the spectrum. Thus, the balancing act, because oppositions essentially enable us to create the balance between the two archetypes through awareness. That's what an opposition aspect literally represents. It represents awareness. That's what a full moon is. A full moon is a classic archetype of the aspect of the opposition, because a full moon is the sun and moon opposite each other. And what does the full moon do in the sky? It illuminates the whole sky. You could be in an area where there's no electricity, no lights, no nothing, and you have a full moon in the sky, and it gives you light on your path as you're walking. It lights up the trees, the sea, whatever it is, wherever you're walking. So it's that sense of illumination. Um, so, in summary, the Venus retrograde journey is very much about self-awareness, and being comfortable enough to be maybe a little bit isolated, to be alone, because when we are alone, I think we have a good opportunity to really look at things very honestly, if we're able to be really honest with ourselves, and we're just not distracting ourselves, with this, that, and the other. And Aries, is very much about being honest and being direct. And who do we have to be honest with the most? Ourselves. Self-honesty. So then we can be honest with others and the relationships we have with others, to recognize if we have certain agendas and motivations behind the choices we make, with things we stay connected to, people we stay connected to and attached to. So it's just a good opportunity to check in on all of that. And most importantly, to understand that your worth comes from yourself. It doesn't come from anybody else. We may feel like it comes from others at different times, but in the truth, in the heart of the truth of everything, what we need is to give it to ourselves. It's like when we die, when we leave this physical body, even if we are, surrounded by people around us, that last breath we take, nobody knows what that's like, because no one really remembers that experience from a previous life. We die alone, even though there might be people around us. There's so much meaning and power within our own self, our own soul's experience. And everything surrounding us and around us throughout our life is basically just some kind of mirror, Libra, to reflect back to us certain things. Whether we're conscious of that or not, whether we are aware of it or not, that's what's going on. So when Venus is in Aries, she's got to draw back into herself and find her strength within herself, find her own worth and value within herself, not needing it from external forces. Like authentically, really, truly finding it within herself, and not being scared to stand alone, to stand in herself. Aries is the most courageous sign out of all. It literally represents courage. So those are most of my thoughts about the Venus retrograde. This is the Sun-Venus conjunction, otherwise known as the Venus star. The last time the Venus star occurred in Aries was 8 years ago. So this is we're in a point where an 8-year cycle is ending, and a new 8-year cycle is beginning. And we're not going to feel that right now well, we might be feeling it, but we might not have the desired clarity about what that means for the next 8 years, because we don't know what's going to unfold over the next 8 years. What we do know is that this is a new cycle. It's a new degree that the Venus star has arrived at. We know that there's a conjunction to Neptune while Neptune's at the last degree. Let me talk a little bit about that actually. Neptune is hands down the most difficult archetype, the most difficult energy in this earth plane. It might be more subtle, uh, but subtle doesn't mean less impactful or less powerful. It's just a lot trickier to pinpoint and to recognize what's going on with it, because it corresponds to illusion, disillusionment, and disappointment. So I'm interested to see, what that will bring, I suppose, on a collective level and also for us individually. I think with Neptune energy being present at any time, the the best way to work with that energy is to constantly be really real and grounded about what you're doing, about what you're seeing, because Neptune can blindside us like no other energy can in the chart. It's the trickiest energy. And when you're in it, you don't know it, because when you're in it, it can be totally blissful for a while. And then when it starts falling apart, it's because you're starting to see what was there all along, but you just couldn't see it because Neptune was creating the mist in front of your eyes, which another way to say that would be to say that it creates this ideal. You're just seeing the ideal in a person or a situation. It's the God source energy, right? That gets projected onto people, and human beings cannot live up to that. We are an extension of God or source, but we're an aspect of source. We're not the entirety as an individual. When we bring us all together, and I mean everyone, when everyone is put into one, then we are all one, that one source. But we can't experience everything we do if we remain in that oneness. Um, that's why we have this human life, which becomes a single sort of source, a single entity that projects its spirit and soul, through the chart and the archetypes to have the various experiences it does. So, yes, we are part of source, but we are also this individual soul having a individual, unique soul journey, which is different for all of us, right? I think the Pluto sextiling um, the Venus star is a good omen, because of the nature of the sextile, which indicates opportunity. It indicates a sense of energies being supported. They have something in common. The archetypes have something in common. What does air and fire have in common? So fire being the Venus star in Aries and Pluto in Aquarius being an air sign. What do air and fire have in common? They have a few things in common, but the biggest thing they have in common is the desire to express freely. The desire to express freely. So this is an energy that really does bring in that element of the desire to express freely, to feel a sense of authenticity, to feel a sense of freedom within ourselves. Of course, Aquarius connects to freedom, and so does Aries. And Pluto is always an agent of transformation. And for the most part, Pluto's energy can feel really intrusive, depending on what it's doing. I was reminded of something I was reading. I posted this, I think, about a year ago. I was reading it this morning and I thought, yeah, that's a really great reminder. And it was just simply about the meaning of Pluto abducting Persephone, the story of Pluto and Persephone and Ceres, her mother, otherwise known as Demeter. You know, that story is one of my favorite stories out of all the myths. I've got several, but that's definitely up there in my top five because it's a story that I think all of us experience a version of that, sometimes multiple times in one lifetime, but certainly at least once, most people. And what's the story about? You know, it sounds really dark and you know, there's many different ways of looking at it, and there's the projection of the patriarchal uh, way of looking at it, and you know, there's a feminist view. There's you know, there's all sorts of ways of looking at it, but it's just a story about growing up. It's a story about growing up and the desire to experience different things to evolve and grow, which includes experiencing things like loss and pain or separation. And because Pluto abducted Persephone and took her into the underworld, that was an abduction, right? So when we have a Pluto energy coming through, it can feel like Pluto is abducting part of our consciousness. It's invasive in our consciousness and it's difficult to deal with. And I can assure you, it is. I've got Pluto right on my ascendant, so I really feel, you know, the presence of Pluto um, very, very acutely, which on the ascendant is felt in a visceral sense with extreme highs and extreme lows. It's just simply not an easy passage. So when I come on and I share things, because there are some people, you know, that like to hide and then just like to pop up and project some hatred or some. I don't mind having people jump on with a different point of view who want to have a healthy intellectual discussion. That's all fine. I welcome that. But I do not welcome, you know, these kind of little cockroaches that hide, you know, and just sort of throw a little fireball every now and then because they just have nothing better to do. You know, it's people just we should all just keep in mind that everyone's going through something in their life. Everyone. And of course, I'm no different to anybody else. Um, you know, it's life is challenging and it has its ups and lows. But you know, we're just all doing our best to show up. And if we're doing our best to show up in an honest way, as honestly as we can, you know, with ourselves more so than anything else, Venus in Aries, that's, you know, that's a good thing. It might not please others, and that's also fine. But we have to be fine with that within ourselves. I'm not talking about creating conflict, unnecessary conflict, but just feeling comfortable enough to be yourself, even if it means that others won't accept it. You know, think about a group of kids in a school, right, who bully a particular kid, right? And this has been happening forever. Those kids that all come into this little formation of a group who pick on one kid alone are basically little cockroaches because they only generate a sense of security and strength as they all pull in together and bully, one little person. But that one little person who stands up to that or who can somehow overcome that, is the one that's actually really authentic and secure and strong and brave. And they'll just continue, going on their own path, even though they've been excluded from the popular kids or these other groups and so on and so forth. They couldn't care less. That's because they've got more awareness and it's a soul that's much more evolved. Because if you are secure within yourself and confident and strong within yourself, and these are all really great words for Venus in Aries, you won't feel the desperate need to, and because you can translate that story to adult behavior. I see it online in communities all the time where adults, all come together in this sort of community and kiss each other's asses, right, in order to feel a sense of acceptance in the group. And they'll exclude other people because the other person might shine a light where these people had a black spot, and it rattles their little so-called safe community. So they'll further exclude that one individual that comes in and shares something or makes a comment. I've seen it over and over and over again. And I've seen it in astrological communities. And it's just an example of those kids in the school who bully one person who's different, who has the balls to walk their own path, right? And just do their own thing and be themselves. Because it does take courage to do that. So Venus in Aries does bring up all these sorts of themes because it is about being confident, strong, within yourself to understand your own worth and your own value at a deep core soul level. And at the end of the day, our only concern at the bigger picture level should be, in my opinion, should be, am I doing right with my soul and with the source? Am I following what I said I would in this lifetime? Am I okay with that? That's the most important thing. But we live in a narcissistic world where people are allergic to truth. So, put that in the mix where we're going to struggle to find individuals. Well, there are individuals that live that way. I'm one of them. I can say that because I know I am. I'm sure many of you listening can also relate. So I'm not allergic to truth. I'm allergic to bullshit. And Venus in Aries is not about bullshit. It's about truth, the fire, that fire spirit energy. Fire purifies, So this energy is coming through the heart center. The Venus star is an archetype or an energy that really goes or comes through the cosmic heart and our own individual heart. I'm not talking about emotional states. I'm talking about a deeper place within us that is not, dependent on external factors to make that heart energy feel right or good or balanced or whatever. So let me know how you feel about all of this and if it speaks to you. And I will see you all soon. Take care and see you for the lunar eclipse in Virgo coming up soon.